What is happening, you guys? It's your boy Fry coming at you with some New World PvP content, and today I want to get you ready for PvP in New World. Whether you're watching this before the beta on the 9th, before the launch on September 28th, or at any point you're getting into PvP and you just want to hit the ground running. I'm going to break this video into 3 sections. First one is going to be weapon compositions, then we're going to go over attributes, stats, and gear, and then I'm going to go over some tips and tricks I got for you guys. So keeping it short and sweet, let's jump right into it. All right, weapon compositions. Now, if you don't know what that means, basically it just means the 2 weapons that you have equipped in New World. So whether you're trying to figure out which weapon composition you want to run, or just looking for which weapon compositions you can expect to run into, you need to understand which compositions make sense. And in order to do that, we're going to look at the attributes page. So here I have a screenshot from the attributes page as it was in the closed beta. This is before they add any of the new weapons, whether it be the Void Gauntlet, daggers, anything to come. But most of what I teach you right now is going to reign true. So here you'll see the attributes, and next to them you'll see the weapons that scale off of that attribute. So strength, you'll see has no ranged weapons, dexterity, intelligence, and focus has the life staff only. So we're going to skip over the life staff. If you're making a healer build, obviously focus is going to be your primary stat, but you can't really make a composition that makes sense in the way that I'm explaining it now. So we're going to ignore those builds for now, and we're just going to talk about the rest of them. You're going to want to find 2 weapons that both scale off of the same attribute of one of these 3. So when we're talking about weapon compositions and what you can expect or what you can build that makes sense, let's start with strength. Here you'll see the battle axe and the warhammer only scale off of strength and no other attribute. So they're limited to running 2 strength weapons, and there's no ranged weapons under strength. So anybody using a battle axe or a warhammer, you already know they're going to be running a double melee composition. And I'll explain this later, but if you're running double melee, you really should have a battle axe anyway. Then, moving on to dexterity, and where a lot of people are going to reside, is going to be having 1 melee weapon and 1 ranged weapon. So the most 2 popular melee weapons for these builds are going to be the spear and the rapier. Both of them scale pretty well with, or synergize pretty well with a lot of different ranged weapons. But I haven't really seen a lot of success from people using the one-handed sword and a shield yet as far as PvP. So far that seems like more of a tanky PvE type of build. But who knows, the meta could change. And then moving down to intelligence, you'll see this is where the only composition of double ranged resides, and it's actually Fire Staff, Ice Gauntlet. Surprisingly, even though both of these pull off of mana, they actually synergize pretty well together. And this is the only double ranged composition that I've seen work so far. They got probably the Void Gauntlet coming in the future. That's probably going to add a few more different variations in there, but for now, this is what you can expect to see or what you should be aiming to build. So to summarize weapon compositions, basically any 2 weapons that scale off of the same attribute make sense as far as a weapon composition is concerned. So any of those builds that you can imagine or piece together on your own, you can expect to run into and should be prepared to fight. All right, let's jump into the next section. Attributes, stats, and gear. Start with attributes. First thing I want to talk to you about is Constitution. This was widely considered by many people to be the best stat you could get for PvP. Constitution basically increases your health pool and gives you some other perks as you go along that make you tankier basically. You can take more hits, you're more resilient. This is especially important if you're running a double melee build anyways. You want to be able to take some hits because you're going to be rushing and being in their face quite a bit. Just to give you some perspective on how good this stat was, I was running a very much glass cannon build. The idea of my build was almost never get hit, pretty much trying not to get hit at all, and I'm still stacking. I was like 50% of my points I was still putting into Constitution because it just scaled so much better in PvP. Depending on what comp, you're definitely going to want to put some points into Constitution. I might even say you want to race your first 100 points into Constitution with most builds, so you get that plus, what is it, let me look at this, plus 10% of your physical armor as you're added to your max health. That's pretty huge. Not to mention this 20% health consumable bonus is pretty good. Constitution is pretty powerful. And once you choose a weapon composition that makes sense, then the rest of your damage points you can just put into whichever attribute both of those weapons are linked to. So it really simplifies things. So to keep things short and sweet, that's pretty much it for attributes. Pump a bunch into Constitution, and then pump the rest into whatever primary damage stat your composition requires. All right, moving right along, next we have stats and gear. Now, when you get gear, the first thing that you look at for the gear that you get is going to be the stats. And I will just say, for the most part, the stats you're looking for is basically the attributes, and it pertains one-to-one with whichever attributes you're getting. So it should just be Constitution and whichever damage that both of your weapons reside under. So to keep it simple. Now, the other thing you're going to look at as far as gear is the weight. So if it's going to push you up to the next weight category, I guess I should really explain for those of you who haven't played. So with gear, as far as weight is concerned, there is 3 different categories you can fall into. You can have a light armor build, a medium armor build, and a heavy armor build. And it doesn't matter what type of armor you're wearing, as long as the collective weight of all your armor fits you into whichever category you want to be in. So I ran a light armor build, but most of my gear was medium armor, I believe. I think I even was running some heavy armor at some point. And the idea here is you want to pack, because the heavier stuff has more armor to it and will protect you from more damage, obviously. You want to kind of pack as much weight as you can and get as close as you can to the tip of your category without going to the next one. So when you're getting new gear, you just want to make sure it doesn't push you up over that weight into the next category. And then the last thing we're going to look at as far as gear is going to be gem slots. And basically better gear is going to have gem slots. It's just which gems do you want to put in the armor or the weapons. So if you look at the gems, you'll see it has an armor attribute and a weapon attribute. So each gem does a different thing, whether you're putting it in armor or in a weapon. Now, this is going to shift based on the meta. Let me explain what I mean. Right now, the way it was in closed beta, the meta was most people were playing with Battle Axe Hatchet. The most OP comp seemed to be Battle Axe Hatchet. So the best thing to put in your armor was Moonstones, because they gave you slash damage reduction. If the meta changes and more people are running different compositions, then you might want to switch that up. If it becomes more variable, you're going to want to get something maybe just physical damage reduction that covers more of your bases instead of just slash damage, etc. So you want to keep track of the meta and what's popular and base your armor gems off of that. And then as far as weapon gems, I personally think the most powerful one was the Emerald. And what the Emerald did in the weapons was it gave you a damage buff when your opponent or whoever you're hitting is below 30% health, which could turn a lot of your big damaging moves into like an execute. So being able to finish someone off at low health seemed like the most value to me. One thing I will say to look out for is the Emerald gives you a damage bonus when your opponent is 30% or less health. The Moonstone looks almost exactly the same. It says when player is below 30% health, get a 30% damage buff. But what that means is when you, the player, are below 30% health, then you get an extra damage buff. So it's not the execute buff that you're talking about, which is why the Moonstone is an even bigger damage buff than the Emerald. But don't get confused and put the Moonstone in your weapon and think that you're getting extra damage when they're below 30% health, because that only beefs it up when you are below 30% health. So, and that's about it for attribute, stats, and gear. So let's move on to some tips and tricks. All right, tip number 1 is going to be, if you are not running a battle axe, you want to pick up at least one ranged weapon. What I mean by this is the battle axe is the only melee weapon that has the tools necessary to run down somebody who's trying to run away. Whether they're running away because they're trying to kite you with a ranged weapon or they're just running. Battle axe has Gravity Well, which is a ranged CC. It has Charge, which is a great rushdown tool, and it has Reap, which lets them pull you in if you're just outside their melee range. All 3 of those are amazing tools, and a lot of good PvPers respect into all 3 of them. None of the other melee weapons have nearly as many good tools to catch someone who's running away, so take it from my experience trying to run a bunch of other double melee comps. If you don't have a battle axe, you want at least one ranged weapon to finish off people who are running away, or at least to pepper damage into them and apply pressure. Tip number 2 is going to be about exploiting range. So if you're playing with a ranged weapon and you're either fighting double melee or fighting someone who doesn't seem to want to pull their ranged weapon out, exploit that. Stay out of melee range and pump as much free damage as you can on them while they can't return any damage back to you. Pretty simple. Tip number 2, exploit your range. All right, tip number 3 is going to be basically the opposite of tip number 2. When you are using a melee trying to rush down a ranged weapon, make sure that most of your movement is directly towards them. I see a common mistake. A lot of people, even if they're running straight at them, when they use their roll, they were rolling straight to the side, or just their zigzagging was way too lateral. But when you're running straight to the side, you're pretty much just running in a circle around me, which is basically like you running in circles while I'm pumping free range damage at you. So when you roll or dodge in this game, you're completely invulnerable for most of that animation. So rolls and dodges should be either directly at them or almost directly at them. And then you keep your zigzagging while you're rushing them down to a minimum. You want to close the gap towards the person you're rushing down as quickly as possible. So tip number 3, make sure when you're rushing someone down, you rush them down as quickly as possible. All right, tip number 4, make sure whenever you leave town flagged for PvP specifically, especially, you're stacked on food and health potions, especially health potions. Little side note, if you have extra faction points, you can buy health potions from your faction vendor. Make sure you grab a stack whenever you're about to cap on faction points. Don't leave town without food, health potions, and if possible, also regen potions, because regen potions run on a separate 30-second cooldown from health potions. Tip number 5 is going to be don't overfocus on just one weapon. When you level each weapon up, the max abilities you have is 3 for weapons. So with 2 weapons, your max abilities is only 6. You should be keeping track of all 6 of your cooldowns and have them all at your disposal at any moment. Tip number 6 is going to be practice, practice, practice. Get a group of friends who all use different weapon types and just start dueling them as often as you can. Dueling is very forgiving. Every time you lose a duel, you can think about what you did wrong, try to change it, and try it again. Repetition is going to help you a lot with tweaking, getting your muscle memory down, getting practice in a lot of different situations. You'll find dueling the same person with the same playstyle, you can still run into a lot of different situations. It takes like duel after duel after duel to get through all of them. So tip number 6, practice, practice, practice. And my last tip for you, tip number 7, record your gameplay. It is the most invaluable tip I can give you. If you have a NVIDIA card and you have shadow play running, have the instant replay up. If you get some unexpected PvP and you lost, or even if you won but it was a struggle, you thought it was a good fight, hit the replay button, save that footage. If you're doing a big dueling session with a bunch of your friends, just record the whole thing. And then when you got a bunch of free time, go back and watch it later. Or if servers go down for maintenance, go back, watch your footage. I picked up on more mistakes watching my footage from the closed beta than I did from when I was actually playing in the closed beta. 10,000 foot view, hindsight is always 20/20. Tip number 7, record your footage if at all possible. All right, that's going to be it for this one, you guys. I hope you got something out of this. If you did, please drop a like. It helps the channel a ton. If you want to see more New World PvP content, go ahead and subscribe. I plan on bringing the highest level PvP content I can, and that's going to include build guides, how-tos, certain matchups, common mistakes I run into. Yeah, a lot of good content to come. So on top of that, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, drop them down in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. I love giving my feedback. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Fry out. Next one is going to be attribute stats and gearing. And the third and final one will be tractor blah 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 blah. Damn it.